Are we rolling? Well, as Madonna said, strike a pose. I've lost a lot of weight, and I don't care. I'm aiming to lose more because it's just a prudent thing to do. The facts and the logic of science tells us that the fewer calories you eat on any given day, the longer you will live to eat those calories on a future day. At the end of your life, for instance, when you live longer because you didn't eat the calories that day. And I believe that is why the one-off, one-on, which I wouldn't even be considering if I didn't have this like little tickle in my liver, but if indeed it's something serious like cancer, the thing to do is not, I should say, is to not give the body and thus not give the tumor any more calories than it needs, and thus retarding the growth of that nasty little malignancy. But in any case, that is the prudent dietary choice for any body that is in any body that has a body, and that is most of us, that you can see at least. But yes, any body that wants to live a long time should really think about caloric restriction. And let me be clear, it is the exact opposite of what bodybuilding is about. And I realized that as I was in the midst of a rather ridiculously overdosed and overlong cycle that, coincided with these mysterious liver pains that I'm now having. And I should say, this is really of my own doing, what with all the drinking that I've done during my life as well. And so the selfishness on my part is immense, and the desire to have a big superhero type body, it was overwhelming, really, and drove me to use needles and things like that. Things that normal people don't do, but big erexics like us, and I'm talking to Doucette, I'm talking to Derek, and I'm talking not to Vegan Gains. He warned me against this course of action, as he's warned us all, so eloquently. The man is good, and, I really need to tell him specifically, and all y'all, about my mystical experience and how I have now proof, which I always wanted. I have now a personal miracle that was done for me. I don't want to get into it right now, but there'll be plenty of videos where I will refer to it, the mystic backpack. That was there, that was gone because it had been stolen and then was returned. And I had a do-over of the most amazing and profound sort. And I know now that what we see here in the material world is positively and absolutely not the be-all and end-all. And this was something that I suspected before, but now I know most certainly and beyond doubt that the material world is just that. And there is something much deeper and perhaps even more profoundly beautiful we don't know. I can't say with any certainty, but I always did say that if I could witness with my own eyes a miracle, I would be a lot more inclined to believe in what is written. Yes. And so, because most of it is good stuff, but Vegan Gains, I ask you this, I put this to you, sir. When you say God pretends to be infinitely merciful of those who conjecture in his favor, propose him to be infinitely merciful, well, that is not really the case when you think about so what a bizarre treatise the Old Testament is, and how many instances specifically where God does, as Louis C.K. said, some pretty bizarre shit, kind of like my ex-girlfriend level weirdness. Like, go kill your son and all that kind of thing like that. But not for me to presume that it is either true or false, but certainly not to stand up and say that it is certainly false. No, and I think that was presumptuous of you. And if you're still in stance, I believe it is presumptuous. And really, you are behaving in so many respects like the credulous cretins who you so eloquently lampoon. Yes, you. When you child rape, repeating that phrase ad nauseum as you do when you get into these debates, it's tiresome and it's not really a logical argument because, duh, Mr. Gamer, Mr. I'm sure sci-fi fan, like I am myself from way back, if there is a good force, there is also a dark force, and the dark side is strong with some, unfortunately. Yes, psychopathy is a real thing, right? But it is not God's fault. It is miswiring, and we're finding out that in many cases that is a birth defect, a structural abnormality in the circuitry of the brain that causes chilling personality effects like that. But I have reason to personally, I have personal experience with that. We'll touch on later, right? Yes. Anyway, it's not God that miswires the brains. It's oftentimes the teratogenic effects of in utero exposure to various drugs that some women are known to take while pregnant, and that some doctors even prescribe. But anyway, that is a different story. I just want to say that, hey, the thing that leads me into this realm of alternate day fasting is not just because, it's exclusively because I want to slow the progression of what may be a really nasty disease, and that is the best way that I can approach it at this point. And it certainly is a non-toxic way and is a proactively healthy way to go about, extending my life. If that is the case, it is extending anybody's life, because it's the case for everybody, as I keep telling y'all. And my theory is, and I stand by it, and I'm sure most nutrition scientists and longevity experts would back me up on this, that because bodybuilding and being a bigorexic and constantly looking for size and strength gains is the opposite of caloric restriction, it is in fact caloric expansion. Eating for gains and training for gains and all the oxidative load, the enormous car bombs of free radical, as I call them, of free radicals, as I call our workouts, are like a car bomb of free radicals inside your poor human frame, which you've now sauced up to 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds over your, what is known as your set weight, where you're supposed to weigh, and what your organs are capable of supporting for an X number of years. Now, if you are so intent on wearing part of another man's musculature that you're like Doucette, up around 200 pounds, even though, your set weight was perhaps 150, that's a 1/3 more than you're supposed to weigh, and the math that I do shows that you're likely to live definitely not as long as the average man that carried a normal body weight, and maybe not 1/3 less, but you will no doubt, and there is no way, there is an incontrovertible fact that you will begin to show the diseases of aging at a younger age because you are running such a high oxidative load. Every calorie burned produces a certain number of free radicals, and if you make sure to eat only whole foods, you can damp down that free radical damage to some extent because of all the antioxidants that whole foods are accompanied with. The energy provided in whole foods are antioxidants, and I'm telling you that you can only do so much to prevent free radical damage by eating a clean diet and eating a whole food diet. And certainly Doucette is not hardcore like I am, and certainly I know he's a health-minded and healthy kind of eating guy, but he eats plenty of junky white bread, junk food crap that is known to displace what could be nutritious food in one's diet. And I think the so-called anabolic French toast falls into that category. Junky junk food, good for its stated purpose, yes, which is providing carbs and protein, which is toxic carbs. White flour is fucking toxic, and egg white, even though it doesn't contain any fat or cholesterol, is fucking toxic. It's animal protein. And since we know these things for a fact, why would we be eating any of that shit? There are whole grain, there are fucking whole food based alternatives that taste just as freaking good. And so I'm here to say that, you are misguided when you are carrying all this extra muscle mass, and I want you to acknowledge it. And I'm talking to all y'all out there who have people that are depending on you and looking forward and looking up to you and looking forward to a long and healthy life with you, namely your wife and kids, or children and their mother. And they should stand up for themselves too if they ever hear this and say, hey, Dad, I heard on that video that when you carry around a whole bunch of extra muscle mass like you're doing and strike this really masculine pose that you're trying to be this big tough guy, and move all this iron in the gym, and that really, really causes premature aging, and all the things that go along with getting old will strike you at a younger age because you've been burning the candle so much brighter than the average man. And the object of caloric restriction is to actually lower your metabolism. That is the key to living long, and that is why it's always blown my little mind when these diet gurus and fad books that's touting their stats want to sell people on the fact that whatever maneuver they're touting is actually raising your metabolism. I've known since I was a little kid that your metabolic rate is the rate at which you are aging, essentially. Yes, it is. And that's why, anyway, who really wants to live a short life just in the name of vanity and carrying around a really big set of pectorals and deltoids, And I was that guy. I was willing to, accept whatever. I was going to change my numbers for the worse, yes, but if I still eat a vegan diet, well, no, that can't compensate entirely. My heart still got enlarged, and I may have actually, if not given myself liver cancer, at least accelerated it, taking it from a nodule into something that was a response to the increased load. The massive amounts of extra calories I was eating, stay outside however many times a day, even if it was trying to do mostly, but I was eating meat as well. I'm like, if I'm going to go to the dark side and use some freaking juice, I might as well be, bulking up proper, and getting some, big chunks of salmon in there, and blah, 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 blah. And that shit is toxic too, and that shit accelerates, and that's why I'm totally off of all meat products now, because it's known that IGF accelerates the growth of tumors, and if you have any, and some people may have latent ones, many people that are older do, they say, and so you want to eat as many nutrients and non-meat foodstuffs and whole food foodstuffs as possible, especially as an older person. But the younger you start, the better and longer you'll live. Period. The younger you start your caloric restriction type of regimen, your life extension regimen, the more likely you are to live to be a super centenarian. Someone who goes well into their 100 pluses and goes strongly into them and youthfully, with the youthful vigor of, let's say, today's 60 or 70-year-olds, in 100-year-olds, because they've been burning that candle so sparingly and eating so sparingly over the years. And that's the way to do it. That's why I'm on board with one day on, one day off. No, that's not the reason. I don't think I'd be able to do it if it weren't for the impetus and the incentive of possibly extending my, what is probably, if this is cancer, a pretty short life expectancy. And then extending it substantially, like doubling it, because I feel like every day you don't eat, you manage not to eat anything, is a day tacked on to the end of your life, because it is not the years that you live, it is the calories that you consume that age you. We know this. That is why caloric restriction works. And the more severely you do it, and the more hunger you are willing to take, the longer you will live, period. That seems to be the case. That seems to be the facts. And so, in my case, it's a much more, an exponentially both more important and a microcosm, in the sense that it won't be played out over years, but over months, right? Now, hopefully, knock wood, it's not true. Yes, there is a God. I know this. And perhaps his message to me was to say, be strong at the end, lad. But I much prefer to think it is the message of, you can get this house built, because I bought a huge wreck of a house in Marin, where I'm from and where I love to live, where I would love to live, right? But it's not inhabitable at this moment. And, the code enforcement has been on me to do this and that, and it will need both a new foundation and a new septic system and a new roof. And yes, that's just to get started and make it habitable, right? Those are big steps, and I have a lot on my plate should I live. And I love this life, and I am so up to the challenge, especially with God's support. I could not fail in that. I know it. And so I hope He gives me that chance. And if not, it is my fault. This is very logical universe. Vegan gains, it is very orderly. There really are no curses, although human nature tends, in people that have no regulatory, inhibitory, or pro-social mechanisms in place, and most of that is hardwiring, in people that tend to the dark side, if you will, in people that are strong with the dark side, if you will, they allow their instinctive drives to take over their rational minds to some extent, and that is why we get what we get, the nastiness that we get in the world. But vegan gains, I'm telling you, if you believe in the Force, and I'm sure you do, in your heart of hearts, you believe in the Force, well, of course you must believe in the dark side, and you can't, it's undeniable. But it is the dark side of man, but there is conjecture about Satan as well, but who really cares that there is a God that somehow keeps track of us all, which I think that goes to the my logical reluctance to ever accept or want to accept what I would see as, and what I would call and have for years as, blind faith, that some of these credulous cretins, as we say, right, seem to have and do have this righteously blind faith that they have. And I now see, right, it was shown to me, He showed me that this plane that we live on is just that, a plane. And there may be many, but I'm not declaring any ultimate knowledge like, oh, Dawkins and oh, Pinker, and you vegan games, some declaration of ultimate knowledge. Well, how could you? That is so presumptuous and so absurd. So presumptuous and so absurd. Oh, and to see that backpack back in my seat, where just a split second before it had not been, it had been stolen. This here huge backpack was gone from my car. I left the window open as I went to the restroom. It was gone. Oh, I felt like tearing my hair out. I just kept it together because, I was in early sobriety. It was only a month then, right? I had sauced off. I had stopped drinking, and I managed to control myself. But I put myself together. I was so distraught about this thing is amazing, and this itself was a blessing, right? That I found in Salvation Army. I will tell you this, peeps. Go to thrift stores. They are a chance for God to give you what He needs. What you need, I should say. And what He needs is for you to be happy. Really. The question to the answer to the question of why God chose this reality and why He bothers, I think it's obvious. If you were infinitely powerful and all alone for eternity, you would want some company too. And He finds our struggles fascinating, He must. And He finds our triumph sweet, He must. And He gives us assists, I believe, wherever possible. And my mystic backpack experience was an assist in my life. I believe it's my duty to bring it to other people. This thing was gone into another plane, and I was not on anything. I was distraught at having lost it. Like so many things in my life, I've let them get stolen or misplaced. Like so many things, bicycles and cell phones. Just in the last couple of years, I've lost a dozen or something. Every time I go, well, I guess I can afford it. Oh, which I can't really. Not really, no. Yes, there is a God. Yes, there is a God. Yes, and caloric restriction is part of His plan. Why do you think it's all throughout the Bible about fasting, right? And many different spiritual and, many different faiths have it mentioned in their writings, and there seems to be a very obvious answer and reason, because it's good for you. And the cutting edge experts Fung and, guys that I really deeply respect that have people's best health, heart's best interest at mind, instead of the pharmaceutical reps that they rep for, basically. That's who most doctors play for. That's the team they play for. The more drugs they prescribe, the more brownie points and the more their income reflects it positively. Yes, there are fucking financial incentives for doctors to fucking not tell the truth about veganism and how it can save your fucking life. Most of them are well informed enough to know it, but will they tell their patients these days? No. Oh, that would be fat shaming, right? Or something. There's some fucking rationale. You know, that's asking too much of my patients, really, to make them cut out eggs and milk, right? That's just a start. All meat needs to go, especially processed meat. That's the first thing I would not allow in Liberty's diet. There are alternatives, that will save your life. They're not the best because many of the alternatives are themselves empty calories, but at least they're not toxic calories, right? Oh, listen to me, my peeps. Listen to me. You can live a long and healthy life and not encounter so many of these infirmities that strike people now younger and younger. Even to the point of amputations and things resulting from diabetes, which my daughter's mother is headed for if she doesn't lose some weight. She's 220 pounds. She says the scale is wrong. Well, I've been losing weight on that scale. I find it funny that she would say that, right? Don't you? The scale is wrong. Well, at least if we saw some downward progress, we could be happy about that. I certainly would be. Because at that way she's headed for disaster, especially with Alzheimer's in her family, and her dementia seems to be kicking in. She's been complaining about her memory for at least a year or two that I have noticed. Her complaints, not mine noticing it, but her complaints. Well, I'm probably getting Alzheimer's, right? Oh my goodness, and now to find out that it is a disease that can be combated, but it definitely requires losing weight as a first step. So I'm going to ask her to do the one-on, one-off with me. In a way, it requires less discipline, I guess, because, no, it doesn't require less discipline, it requires more. And then you can eat the next day. And the thing about it is it fucking works. It works. It's rough, but it works. And it's good for you. Even longer day fasts are good for you, but I'm not really cut out for a week-long fast because I'm only at 10 or 12% body fat at most, right? And so, I'm not really wanting to fast everything all down to bones just yet, especially I have a certain amount of body mass to work with, and that's really, if this is, what it might be, that will dictate how long I live, really. How much I can whittle my frame down, because all that time it gathering steam in there, right? And that's what they do, is they assemble their angiogenesis and the vascular supply. Anyway, enough horror. What about just being able to sit with hunger is a very, very great, neat thing. And, I'm going to ask her to do it with me for both of our sakes and for our daughter's sake, because I need to slow this progression and she needs to slow the progression of her dementia, and there's no better way than actually losing some weight, and the one-on, one-off is a way to do that. The intermittent fasting where you can feed at the end of the day hasn't been resulting in any progress, and I've stabilized as well, and so is she, and the one-on, one-off offers hope, so I'm hoping she says yes. I love that woman, and I love my daughter. I would hate to see her an orphan, because she needs her parents, especially. She does. Yes, she does.